Started. Um, okay. Namaste, Elaine. Am I spelling your name, pronouncing your name correct?
Absolutely.
Wow, I got it right at the first time. Thank you.
Woohoo! Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, more than a pleasure, I would say it's inspirational. That's the right word. And since I love listening to the stories and I read about you, we talked already. I would like to mention again and again that she says, like, make your day good every day. That's a choice. You can make your day good. That's a choice.
Make the
That is
most of your
something
today,
of
every
make the
day.
most of your today. And since I have talked to you every morning, I remind myself of that. Remember, you have a choice. That's the
Oh, I
impact.
love that. I
That's
love
the
that.
impact. That's the impact. And she is known as the queen of reinvention. That's a beautiful word, and you make it more beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. More by necessity than anything else.
So, yeah, let's start by listening to your journey, a little bit about yourself. And then, if I have any questions, I'll be asking you questions.
Perfect. Perfect. I'll start by saying that I had what's now known as suicidal ideation from the time I was a child. And we didn't know what that was back then. I certainly didn't have a name for it. I didn't know that everybody didn't think that way because it was normal for me. If I dropped my cereal bowl, or if I had a fight with somebody in the schoolyard, one of the options was always, well, I could just exit this life. And it was a very strange thing to come to terms with. And I came to terms with it at 16 years of age when I lost one of my dear friends, Andrea, who took her own life. It caused a weird sort of wake up call because I had been offhand saying that I was going to exit all the time. It was just part of the what was going on in my head. And I think that was part of my lack of acceptance of Andrea's death. I did not handle it well at all. I decided I would make myself feel nothing because nothing was preferable to the pain that I was feeling. And to that end, I tried alcohol, I tried drugs, I tried anything I could get my hands on. But mentally, I guess what I did is I reverted to being about 12 years old. I didn't mature. I didn't go forward. I didn't see a future for myself at all. And that went on for about 4 years. Now, don't get me wrong here. I was living life. I was at a very strange time in the early 70s. Everybody in my class was much older than me. I watched the people around me who were leaving to go to college. They were, getting married. They were doing different things. And so I got married. I was 17 years old. My parents were not happy. And within 6 months, we had a little girl. I was just before my 18th birthday. We muddled along for the next couple of years. And in 1976, someone called in the middle of the night to get a lift because they'd been picked up for drinking and driving. Unfortunately, there was a problem with the dimmer switch in my car, which came to light when I ended up driving down the highway. A policeman stopped me for having no lights, and I remarked at the time to the person in my car how odd it was because it was right in front of Andrea's grave. It was 2:30 in the morning. I was 6.5 months pregnant. I had thrown on a giant fur coat with a hood, and I had put clogs on my feet. I don't even think I had socks on. It was March 20th. It was about 30 below Fahrenheit. And there was no visibility on this corner in the highway. The policeman didn't know how to use booster cables, so I had to get between the cars. The cars were in the right-hand lane because we couldn't pull off the road because of the snowbanks. There was so much snow. When I got between the cars to show him how to put on the booster cables, I was on the side of the road, not the snowbank. I'm barely 5'2". I guess he saw the lights as they hit the curb coming round the highway, and he dove into the snowbank and saved himself. The car that came around the highway was doing about 50 miles an hour and plowed into my car, which plowed into me and the police car. And when the cars separated, I went up into the air, sort of ass over tea kettle, and I felt on the way down to the ground, it was like someone put my hood up. And thank God, because my head should have split like a melon. That was a very hard and stone cold highway. And back then, it's 1976. There's no cell phones. There's no paramedics. The ambulance drivers were simply ambulance drivers. They had the rudimentary training for first aid, but that was it. And it took them almost a half hour to get there. It was on the edge of town. Somehow, a lady appeared from I don't know where, and there were truckers and the lady keeping me safe because I was 2 lanes over in the highway. And I couldn't see my car, and I was so upset about not being able to see my car. But they didn't want me to see it because there really wasn't much left of my car. The young man who had hit my car, he ran up, and he's the one who called the ambulance from the restaurant up the highway. Thank God he did. Unfortunately, I lost my child. They had to end my pregnancy because I had to have immediate surgery. The engine of my Mustang tore out half of my left leg vertically from partway down my calf all the way up the inside aspect of my thigh, taking part of my femur and leaving a gaping hole. I couldn't see it because lying on the highway, my left foot was up near my shoulder, and I was bent and broken in so many places. They honestly didn't think I was going to make it to the hospital. The beauty for me was it was so cold that the bleeding was slowing down, so they were able to get me to the hospital. That turned into the next 5 years of having surgeries, plastic surgeries. They took out my kneecaps. They took out all the cartilage in both legs. They ended up having to do a number of abdominal surgeries. They took my gallbladder, a few other things, but it was like every week somebody was doing something else. And it took them 6 weeks to prepare the hole in my leg to get the skin grafting that we needed. I hadn't seen my leg for the first 5 weeks. And when I did, I spiked a horrible fever and became basically delirious for 3 days. I thought life was over because all I thought I was big blue eyes and long, long legs, which is sort of a joke when you're 5'2". They weren't all that long. I just thought they were long. I thought that's all I was. And that is a very important piece of the story because that ties into everything that happened from there. You see, it's unfortunate, but I guess all around the world, but I only knew here in Canada, in North America, it's all about how you look. In our day and age, okay, Twiggy was the ideal model. There certainly wasn't much to her. I was never big. I was just not tiny. I was average size until after the accident. I had cortisone shots in my legs every month for the next 5 years and found myself putting on weight. I ended my marriage. I also ended up remarrying. And the next thing I knew, it was 1982, and I was having another child, my son. So we had a daughter who was 9 years older than my son. And after he was born, I was so deeply in hate with me. I hated everything about me. I hated the scars. I hated the skin grafts. I hated everything because from top to bottom, back then, I thought I was a ton of scars. Little did I know. Um, I guess something you have to know now that, we're all these years later. I'm 68 years old, so it's a long, long time later. But the universe or God or whatever you call that higher power, it will give us the confirmation we look for, whether we're looking for something good or we're looking for something bad. And after my son was born, I was so disgusted by how much weight I'd put on and how I looked. I was looking for anything I could do to change this. And I happened to see on television uh, some show that talked about this new vertical banded gastroplasty. It was stomach stapling, and it was a surgery to help people lose weight. Well, I was bound and determined. I researched it. I found out all I could. There was only one doctor in our city that did it. And my whole family was absolutely aghast that I would even consider this. After all the surgeries I had had up until that point, I think they thought I was a little crazy. But because of the weight, I was reliant upon an awful lot of drugs for pain relief. My legs, my legs are in pain 24/7, and they have been since 1976. It doesn't make you a really pleasant person, by the way. Anyway, 3 months or so after my son was born, the whole family was out for brunch on a Sunday at this really nice restaurant. I had gone into the washroom, and a woman came out of a stall and looked at me through the mirror, and she said, "Oh, wow, you are so beautiful. Why are you fat?" For me, that was the confirmation I'd been looking for. That was what I'd asked the universe, for someone to tell me that what I knew, I was this horrid thing that just needed to be fixed. And that was it. There was no turning back because there was no one who could dissuade me from doing what I wanted to do. By the next year, I was running a group of people. I worked for a big cosmetics company. I was a manager with 30 or 40 people under me. And in August, we went to Las Vegas for our convention. And it was wonderful. I had a great time. I was prepping for the surgery. I'd done all the testing. I'd done everything I'd been asked. And I came back the first week of September. I was to go into the hospital on the 12th. The surgery would be on the 13th. And we were told, my whole family was so upset with me, but we were told that I would have a tube in my side called a J tube that I would feed through for 3 weeks. And I could have nothing by mouth, no water, no liquid, no food, nothing, in order to let what they'd done heal. So that made perfect sense to me. I wanted this. I fought for this. I went against my whole family to do this. So there was no way I was going to jeopardize that. Anyway, I went into surgery, and unfortunately for us, we'll never know what actually happened in that surgery because the doctor was being investigated as he'd already killed 2 people with this surgery. We didn't know any of that. Whatever happened in my surgery, the upshot was it caused a gastric leak. The machine that they used to make the hole in the stomach that they stapled together, I don't know, they didn't hold it right or it misfired or who knows, but it didn't work. The doctor did not tell us any of this. And 2 days after surgery, I started having this weird pain in my shoulder tip. Now, I know now what that means. I didn't know then. It's the sign of a gastric leak. It's way up in your shoulder. But not knowing that and wanting to show my family how committed I was and how this was going to be okay. After a week, I was sent home. I went home with nothing for pain because I don't know, I guess I thought if I suffered, then my family would be, I don't know, happier that I'd done this. It was kind of crazy. I was only home for 17 hours. My husband had to call the emergency room because I was in so much pain. I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand, I couldn't lie down. And there was no way to give me a pill because it had to go in this tube in my side. So we called emergency and we went in. And you have to understand, this was very early on. This type of surgery had only been created in 1982. So nobody else knew anything about it. And the good doctor in the emergency, he realized how much pain I was in, and he ended up giving me a shot and writing a prescription so that my husband could fill it when we went home. It was just after 11, I think, or closer to midnight, and he said, go ahead, you can get dressed and go home. And as I was opening the curtain from where I was in Emerge, my husband saw the resident that had been in my surgery walk by. But the resident saw my husband. And my husband said chills ran up and down his spine because the guy looked terrified. And he said, I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew something was bad. And the next thing I know, they're hustling me back on a bed and telling me I have to go for special x-rays. And they wouldn't tell us anything else. So it was really bizarre. They did the x-rays and they came back and told us that they had to operate right away because I was dying. I had a gastric leak. No one told me how that happened. But from the minute the doctor came in that next day, he started trying to get me to say I had eaten or drank something, which just didn't make sense to me. It just seemed so weird. Like, why would you say that? I've worked with you for almost a year to set this up. Why would I do that? And, well, we now know that whatever he did in that first surgery, whatever he messed up, he was just trying to cover up. So when they operated the second time, in all honesty, we don't think he did an awful lot. He opened me up. I don't know if he used a hose and cleaned out the abdomen. I don't know what he did, but he just closed me right back up again, which meant that this pouch they had made that he had manually sutured up was basically percolating full of infection. A day after the second surgery, it ended up that I was spiking such a high fever, I was kind of in and out of consciousness. The whole time I was in the hospital, almost every day, they had to give me more blood transfusions. They knew I was bleeding somewhere, but they couldn't tell where. 4 days after that, I developed an abscess on my left lung, and they had to put in a chest tube. It was all so bizarre and scary because they had my husband hold me over a table while they inserted this thing in my side. And it was terrifying because with this chest tube, they kept saying that I had to be careful, don't move too much because you won't be able to breathe. And already that was terrifying. 2 days after that, it was my daughter's birthday. It was September 28th. And that morning, they took me back to X-ray and they did a gastrograph and swallow. The doctor, all this time, every day during the week, he would come in and say, come on, I know you ate something. I know you did. Okay, that's why you're here. That's why this is happening. And it was just so bullying, I guess, is what I thought at the time. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I was so ill, I couldn't put 2 and 2 together. That morning after the gastrograph, they brought in Dr. Sapala, who was the head of X-ray, and he came to the gurney and said, you need to call your family and you need to sign these papers. We have to take you to surgery right now. I said, no, sorry, you're done. It was like, no, you operated last week and you operated the week before, and today's my daughter's birthday. No, you're not cutting me open again. And he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're not going to live to supper time. You have to have this surgery. And I asked a nurse for a phone, and I called my husband and then my father and said, don't you dare sign these papers. Lucky for me, they didn't listen to me. They signed the papers and they took me to surgery. Unfortunately, in this third surgery, I don't know the exact order of what happened because the doctor made 3 different OR reports for every surgery. We now know he was trying to cover his tracks. This last surgery, well, the first thing that happened, I believe, is my heart stopped. And he immediately went into, I don't know, cleanup mode. And we found out 12 years later, he took the stomach stapling apart. He completely disassembled everything. They got my heart started. And I guess his idea was that he wouldn't be held accountable for what he'd done if they couldn't find anything in there. Unfortunately for him, I stopped breathing and they had to bring me back. And I guess by that point, he kind of panicked and he brought in a thoracic surgeon. They're the ones who work on your chest and everything. And the thoracic surgeon was asked to medically slit my throat and divert my esophagus out my neck. I didn't find any of this out until I woke up hours and hours later in ICU. They couldn't close my scar. They had opened me basically from my chest all the way down past my waist. And they couldn't close me because the tissue was what they call friable. If you open and close people too often, the skin just falls apart. So they had to pack me. And the packing, the nurses would come in 3 times a day and change the packing. But when I came to in this room at ICU, there were great big jars on the floor, and they are called gravity suction because there were too many tubes coming in and out of me for the appliances on the wall to be plugged in. And the weirdest one, the worst shock I got, was finding a little tube coming out of the hole in my neck because I couldn't understand why I had a hole in my neck. And it just kind of gurgled. And I was there for 11 days. And in that time, I learned that saliva is like battery acid. It started eating all my skin. They were trying to keep it off, but when you have a hole in you, you leak. It's just the way it works. And one of the big tubes on my right side, I don't even know where he went. I called him Hugo because Hugo, where I go. And he stayed with me for over 7 months. He actually went home with me eventually. I have a very bent sense of humor, and I think that helped me get through all of this. But all the other bits and pieces, and they had drains that looked like little hand grenades. They're called Jackson Pratts. And I could be a doctor now. I've learned so much in all the months I was in the hospital. But all of these things were not as much of a pain as this little hole in my neck. And it was no bigger than the end of my finger at first. But it was causing so much pain from, I was blistered and sore all over my chest wall. So when I got back to a regular ward, one of the nurses, she said, I want you to meet somebody. And she brought in a lady who is called a stoma therapist. And she's the one who teaches people how to use colostomy bags when you lose part of your intestines. And they brought her in because she was able to teach me how to use a colostomy bag on my neck. So we only had to change it every 2 to 3 days. And it would, sorry for being gross, but catch the saliva so it wouldn't ruin my skin. Unfortunately, that too, along with Hugo, had to go home with me because they didn't put my neck back together until almost March of the next year. It was not a great time, and I have to tell you, the colostomy bags used to be clear plastic, and they just had a big gluey thing that I would stick on my neck, and at the bottom there was a clip, like you put on potato chip bags, pretty much. I used to say to people, clear plastic is an absolute bitch to accessorize. Sorry for the language. Even in that state, I guess I was a little too vain for my own good. All of this would be a cautionary tale if it ended there. But the fact is, when I finally went home, just before Christmas, the first time, I was unable to eat anything still, had nothing by mouth, no water, nothing. It all went in the tube in my side. And when the other doctor tried to put my neck back together, there was a lot of scar tissue that had formed. And so there was a problem. And I still couldn't eat. I couldn't swallow things, and they had to go in and do what they call dilatations. It's like big bullets they put into your throat and stretch it out, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger so they can stretch it out. I ended up not being able to eat by mouth for over a year. And the only reason the emergency doctor took out the tube in my side is because it'd fallen out so many times, they had to keep cutting me open. It was on average 2 to 3 times a month. I'd have to go back to the hospital, let them cut my side open, put the tube back in, put the little thing called a stopcock on, and hope that it wouldn't fall out. There are a lot of funny stories that go with that. Over time, my girlfriend, who I got to go see because I kept losing weight, because that's what happens when you don't eat for a year. When I went to my friend's place, I wanted to show her the new me, and I had on a lovely vanilla cream dress and a sort of a creamy colored coat. It was raining, and she sent her fiance to come get me in his little Mercedes rag top. It had beige interior, leather. Thank God, because leather at least cleans. I got out of his car and he helped me up to the front door and we rang the bell. And when my friend Lois came to the door, I opened my coat and I went, ta-da! And the look on her face was like she had seen a monster. And I looked down and the stopcock had fallen out of my J tube and I was covered in bile all the way to my feet. Which is not the impression you want to leave with anybody, unless you're trying to scare them, I guess. It was pretty bad. We laugh about it now because it's so much later, and what else are you going to do? The next 10 years, I basically lived on Onshore, which is a protein drink. They tried to help at another hospital, but nobody knew what this man had done to me. And they really didn't know how to fix something they had no clue about. But it was kind of funny. About 6 years later, they did a group of x-rays. And I can remember the x-ray guy saying, you know, if I didn't know you better, I'd call you a liar. And I thought, what? He said, you know, we're just not finding what we expect to find. And it wasn't for another 6 years until we learned that he had taken it all apart. I only had my stomach stapled for 20 days, which is so bizarre. The whole thing was bizarre. Anyway, the upshot of all that is I ended up with hepatitis C. A year later, for Christmas, I got diabetes and I'm insulin dependent. And in 2001, I had broken my wrist a couple of times walking my dog, or my son's dog, the big one. He's 10 pounds, not exactly giant. We couldn't figure out what happened. And then a friend and I went out to a movie, and I fell getting out of the car and completely shattered my humerus, which is the bone in your upper arm. It shattered into a ton of pieces. And that's when they learned that I have osteoporosis. We also learned that I was suffering from malnutrition and malabsorption, and my stomach doesn't empty properly or on time because it seems in his haste to, I don't know, take it apart, fix it, do whatever, he cut my vagus nerve. So there have been ongoing issues with that. And we're talking, you know, like more than 40 years later. And in 2016, I got cirrhosis. And last year, we've been trying to fix this hernia that's in my small intestine where they kept cutting me open for about 2 years. And when we started talking to surgeons, nobody wants to fix it. Nobody wants to go in there because they're afraid, I guess. And when we did the lead up last fall, I found out I have chronic pancreatitis. All of this comes from 20 days with my stomach stapled, which is, when you think of it, really ridiculous. But why I'm even telling the story, and particularly right now, people are talking about semaglutide. This is the new Ozempic and Victoza and Wegovy and Mounjaro. And all of those, they cannot have any idea of what the long-term effects are because they haven't been around long enough. I know. No one knew the long-term effects. The complications that they talked about when I went for the surgery was nausea, vomiting, possible gastric stenosis, like your stomach might shut down for a bit, or they would have to redo the surgery. Those were the complications. Didn't suffer any of those complications. All of my complications are more life-threatening and more longer term. Because like I said, I'm 68 years old. I had this surgery when I was 27. That's a long, long time. And the biggest thing I think that I want people to know, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit yucky, as some people say, but I don't have control over my bowels. I can't process fat. I can't process certain vegetables. Kale is a killer. There are a lot of things, and there is no rhyme or reason. So I joke with my friends, but when I tell you I'm having a shitty day, that is not a euphemism. It is for real. And I want the people that are looking at these semi-glutides, if you are not diabetic, which is what they were made for, if you are not severely obese, don't do this to yourself. You can't get off them. They have to be continued for the rest of your life. And what will that do to you? They affect other pieces in your body, and they're already seeing some complications like pancreatitis and other gastric issues that, trust me, is not fun to live with. It's embarrassing, it's painful, it's hard on your mental health. And trust me, when you are someone who lives with suicidal ideation, it really ups the ante when you're having those bad days. That part I don't talk about an awful lot, or I haven't. But with this latest, I guess, encouragement, if you will, about these semaglutide, Oprah did a 3-hour special on TV because she acknowledged that she's taking one of them. And I do understand the lure of that. But if you don't know what's going to happen to you in 5, 10, 15 years, I realize for some of us, 20 or 30 years down the road, maybe isn't a thing anymore. But for everybody else, I just want people to really have a long, hard look and realize the insanity of vanity. We have to stop looking on the outside and start looking on the inside. And I want to tell you the little story about how I got there. The universe, like I said, it conspires to give you, confirm what you're looking for. But also, some people say, oh, yeah, I just didn't learn the lesson. Sometimes the universe has to hit you with a brick. Well, in my case, the universe uses vehicles. So in 1997, we had gone for an early dinner with my son, my daughter, and my granddaughter. And walking back to our car, there was a car parked just where we were walking. And he was looking the other way and backing out. So I knocked on the car to say, like, hello, there's people here. And he stopped when we knocked and we kept walking. And 2 seconds later, this giant man gets out of his car and he's screaming and swearing at us. And why can't you wait? What is wrong with Pete? And he's just foaming at the mouth. Like I've never seen anybody that angry for something that silly. And my daughter said, "There's a child here, like your language." And I was rude and told him, "Shut up, you're an idiot. Get back in your car, you goof." And we kept walking. Well, the next thing I know, my daughter is going to put my granddaughter in the car, and she screamed. And I turned around. He was turning his car in to aim for my kids. So I stepped in the way, and I ended up on the hood of his car. He backed out, and I think he was going to drive away with me on the car, which seems kind of bizarre. But all kinds of people were in the parking lot, and they stopped him, and they called an ambulance, and the police were called, and it seems he was in the bar in the plaza. But other things about the man was a little bit odd. And as I lay there on the ground, because I slid off his car at one point, all I could think was, oh my God, I can't let these poor paramedics pick me up. I am huge. I am blah, blah, blah. And this is all these years later, and I am still focused on the wrong things. So when they got there, the paramedic couldn't believe that I was struggling to get up. My legs are not good. I walked with a cane for many, many, many years. I have a titanium half joint on the bad leg that's only half. Like I said, no kneecaps, no cartilage, nothing. So walking is a bit of a challenge. So getting hit by another car, definitely a challenge. When they got me in that ambulance, suddenly, like the lights went on, and it was like, oh my God, woman, what is wrong with you? And it was this, oh my God, you're the common denominator here. You're wondering why life is a mess and this happens and that happens. Oh my God, it's you. It's you. You have to change this. There has to be more to life than just pain and suffering and garbage. And I thought, I'm blessed with two beautiful children. I have a husband, a lovely family. This this can't I can't let this go on. So I'm really good at research, and I got into the ninth insight and the four agreements, and I watched Oprah, and I listened to all of these things that taught me that there is more. And in 2004, I found my spiritual mentor. My son later nicknamed her the holistic missile because she got right to the heart of the matter. And since then, I have been on a path to learn and increase my gratitude attitude every day. The funny thing is this: I never told anyone my story. The kids didn't even know about everything that I had gone through until 2013. And then somebody asked the right question, and the floodgates opened, and I realized it wasn't just my shame. I might be able to help somebody else not go through this. And perhaps be smart and use this weird gift that my friend Andrea gave me. You see, when she took her life, she showed me what it was to be one left behind. And I didn't want to do that to my family. So thanks to Andrea, I've gotten all these decades of life to live. And now I am so grateful and paying for it in gratitude. And hopefully, with my podcast, where we talk about suicide loss and ideation, I'm able to perhaps give somebody some hope and allow people to share their stories, because sharing your story lightens your burden. Took me a really long time to learn that, but it's true.
Thank you, Elaine. It was, I would say, lovely. I mean,
Thank you.
one thing that stayed with me is your craziness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that that's
So
being bent is how you get through stuff. You have to be able to laugh at yourself. Like you have to.
yeah, I think that is the biggest learning that
Yeah.
you it of course it took some time to laugh at your pain, to accept and to see it from a different perspective, but in the long run, that is the strength.
Oh, absolutely. But even there were the first decade and a half after the accident, I was not a nice human. I was in so much pain. And just recently, a good friend who's incredibly brilliant, he had done a lot of research and he said that pain changes people. You are not yourself. And, going through all of that and, you know, becoming addicted to pharmacological drugs and then getting off them over the pandemic and changing an awful lot of things about me all came about because of that bent sense of humor. If I didn't have that to kind of hang things on, I think life would be very different. And to be honest, I don't think I'd be here. I really don't.
So yes, we have you here and you are here present.
I am. I am.
So it's good to be crazy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I prefer bent. I prefer the
Yeah.
term bent.
Yeah, I mean, you are talking about the hard way to being crazy.
Yes, yes. Oh yeah. And if there's a hard way to do something, I guarantee I'll find the hard way.
You did it already. You're proving it.
Yeah.
You're living it.
Yeah,
Oh, come on.
that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
It's absolutely lovely talking to you. Very inspirational because it's a lot of pain, and you have overcome all of that in a very holistic way. Like you had all the emotions activated, your triggers. You kept on attracting negative thoughts. Negative thoughts. You were in a cycle, constantly going back to the negativity. But as you said, the universe conspires only with the change of thought. That change of thought changed your life. That moment of enlightenment that you said, like lights turned on, it's actually like cracking your uh, uh, cycle, breaking and cracking. It has to unmask, and you have to really. I think one thing also I learned from your sharing is like sometimes, uh, as you said, crazy in a hard way. So universe had to give you that hardness
Oh yeah. Yeah.
to crack you up and just see
Yeah,
through
because
that.
you
And
can only repeat the lesson so many times before like even the universe goes, "Oh, seriously, come on."
yeah. So yeah, no, that is also a learning. Like it's the way you are. It's the way you are, and you will learn in your own way, in your own pace. So that is very true. You have proved that, and you
Yeah.
are now grateful about it. That doesn't really matter when you learned, but you learned, and you're
Well,
happy and grateful.
yeah. And the other thing is this. This is the coolest thing. When you take the lesson, whatever it is, things get so much better. Okay? People are not I laugh because my spiritual mentor thinks it's hilarious. I say, "Oh my god, people are so wonderful." She goes, "Yeah, you didn't used to say that." Because I wasn't looking around me. I was focused on this big ball of pain inside. And that just makes you crabby. And crabby's no place to be. But I have to say, in all honesty, this has only come about in the past 10 years. I've started to understand, what needed to change. And I forgave the policeman that left me on the highway. He didn't do it on purpose. Okay, his lizard brain took over, and he just tried to survive. That's what we do. And understanding all those things gives you a much different perspective. But I'll tell you one thing. I now know the term for what that doctor did to me. He was
What?
gaslighting me. And I didn't understand until a couple of years ago why the concept of someone gaslighting someone bothered me so much.
Mm,
But
yeah.
that's it. That was one more lesson I needed to learn.
Yeah, I mean, and it's incredible to hear that how in different phases of life we are put into that situation so that, well, your turn,
Yeah.
go for it.
Yeah. I think I've had a few people's turns. So I'm just going to get off the merry-go-round for a while, and I'll just watch.
And I like the way you said, like, I'll just watch. So that stepping back is, I think, the place of gratitude and acceptance, which is helping you to step back. You are not insecure, you are complete, and you are open to the experiences and life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, it just keeps getting better, and you have so much space for your own life, rather than thinking of that policeman or whatever. Come on, let them go. Just let them go.
Oh,
Just let them
absolutely.
go.
Absolutely. And that's been a while now. And it's always, well, if we have 2 minutes, I'll tell you why that happened.
Yeah, sure.
I went to an event that a friend put on. It's kind of a energetic and holistic event. And just before lunchtime at the event, the person who put on the event was speaking. And for some reason or other, I kept kind of wandering in my head. And all of a sudden, I remembered something that had happened about 7 or 8 years before. My granddaughter was about 12, and a friend and I went to where they lived. They had a zombie fest at this drive-in. And at the zombie fest, there was a maze that you went through, and zombies were popping out at you and different things. And partway through the maze, I went in with my friend and my granddaughter. Partway through, there was a zombie butcher, and he was standing behind a big, like a big table, like a slab where they cut meat. And he had a cleaver in his hand. And he was right ahead of us, but, sort of raised up. And as we're coming around the corner, he steps out from behind the table with the cleaver and comes towards us. And the next thing I know, my granddaughter is screaming, "Grandma, what is wrong with you? Like, what are you doing?" I had put her in front of me, between the zombie and myself. Now, I'm a sane human being. I know that zombies aren't real. I knew this was a maze. I knew, but my lizard brain took over and was like, yeah, no, we're going to survive. Okay. We've been through enough. We're going to survive this one. And I don't think she'll ever forgive me. But sitting in that theater, listening to people talking, I was seeing this happen in my head. And I kept thinking, oh my God, can I not just pay attention to what's happening? And we exited for lunch, and someone asked me to sit and have lunch with them because they'd heard something about my story and wanted to ask me some questions. And as we sat down, it suddenly occurred to me, I remembered the name of the policeman because until then, I couldn't remember his name. And in that second, it was the universe showing me I was ready to see what really happened and acknowledge he didn't do anything. Okay. And he didn't do anything because his survival instinct took over. And it had nothing to do with me. But it was so bizarre that the universe had to use my granddaughter all those years before to finally teach me that lesson when I was ready to hear it.
Right time for everything.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
So one thing from that I think is really important when you go through trauma, when you live through whatever, and you're starting to come out and acknowledge gratitude and acknowledge there's more, always be aware of what you're thinking and what's around you, because there are lessons that can help you get further ahead faster if you pay attention.
Wow, amazing. I have one question for you.
Yes.
So, after listening to your story, I felt like it was a journey from head to heart.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good, because I completely turned off my heart, my feelings, my everything when Andrea died. And I didn't turn them back on until a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And that's it exactly. I live in my heart now.
And how is life now?
Awesome. Totally awesome.
So that's the
And
message for today.
oh yeah, even when it's not awesome, if you take the lesson, you'll be able to find something funny or something useful.
Yeah, yeah. That's the lesson. Yes, that's the lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And wow, it was very nice talking to you actually,
Well, thank
listening to
you.
your
Thank you very
story.
much. Thank you
And
for listening.
yeah, I love to listen to stories anytime. I'm up for it. um, since we are coming to an end, um, I hope we meet again for some incredible stories.
Absolutely. Yes. Sharing stories is so important.
So important. Yeah. For me, stories are very important because we get to know a different perspective, and
Yeah.
we catch ourselves in those stories. We find ourselves
Yeah.
somewhere there. There's something about stories that you never know. It can change. It can transform. It can.
Absolutely. And there's
Yeah.
always a nugget you can take from
Yeah.
another person's
Absolutely.
story that will fix or help something in yours.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Elaine.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be crazy now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Best way to be.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
And for you and your audience, make the very best of your today every day.
Thank you. Thank you.